In the dry Nevada desert, where heat often wins over life, a blind newborn elephant curled into herself, waiting for the world to let her go. No one believed she had any will left to survive. And across the sanctuary, a retired K-9 was fading just as quietly after losing the man he loved more than anything. Two broken souls who were never meant to meet, until fate placed them in the same room, and everything changed the moment the dog simply sat down beside her. Anamanda. The first light over the Nevada desert usually brought a kind of quiet promise to the sanctuary, but that morning it only made everything feel heavier. The heat rose early, shimmering above the sand, slipping through the metal bars of the tiny recovery pen where Luna lay curled into herself. 4 weeks old, barely larger than a calf, and already at the edge of giving up. Her gray skin, meant to be soft and full, hung loose around her bones. She didn't lift her head when Monica entered. She didn't even twitch an ear. She simply breathed in shallow, uneven drags, like a creature waiting for permission to let go. Monica set down a warm bottle and knelt beside the little elephant. She spoke softly, the way she had for days, the way she had spoken to dozens of orphaned animals before. But Luna turned her face toward the corner of the pen, away from the scent of milk, away from the touch of a hand that wished she would stay. There was no curiosity in her movements, no fear either, just absence. A quiet surrender that chilled Monica more than any wound or fever ever had. Dr. Aaron Blake watched from outside the pen, one hand braced on the metal frame as if he needed it to keep standing. 25 years working with wildlife had taught him how to accept hard outcomes, but this one lodged like a stone in his chest. They had found Luna 6 days earlier beside her mother's lifeless body, both half buried in desert sand after a sudden heat wave. A rancher had spotted the pair from his truck, one form still, one barely moving. By the time the rescue team reached them, the calf was already blind from congenital cataracts that no one had known she had. No herd could teach her how to survive. No mother could guide her steps. And now, despite fluids and warmth and formula, despite every ounce of knowledge a sanctuary could gather, she had begun slipping away. Monica lifted the bottle again. "Sweet girl," she breathed, "just a little sip. Please." Luna's trunk twitched once, then fell still. Another refusal. Another inch lost. Monica set the bottle down and pressed her forehead gently against Luna's back. She didn't cry often at work, but this one, this little soul who hadn't even learned the world before deciding she didn't want it, was breaking her open. Dr. Blake stepped inside the pen. The straw rustled beneath his boots. He touched Luna's side, feeling the week rise and fall. Her heartbeat was there, steady enough, misleadingly strong for a creature whose spirit was collapsing in on itself. He whispered her name as though it might tether her for one more hour. Luna didn't react. The afternoon meeting was quiet in the way rooms get when everyone already knows the truth. The whiteboard listed Luna's numbers. Hydration barely holding, temperature unstable. 0 voluntary feeding. 6 days without taking a full bottle. 6 days of turning her face to the wall. Dr. Blake went over the chart, his voice low but steady, and finished with, "Her body can continue for a while, but her will seems gone." No one interrupted. Even the hum of the old air conditioner felt respectful. Finally, the sanctuary director folded her hands. "Aaron, we can't let her suffer indefinitely. If she continues to refuse nourishment, we have to consider humane measures." Monica inhaled sharply, as if the words themselves had weight. Another staff member glanced toward the window, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Dr. Blake stood there, tired but unmoving. He had seen animals cling to life through unbearable circumstances. He had seen others slip away despite perfect care. But Luna felt different. Something inside him insisted that she hadn't been given the right reason to try. Not yet. Not by them. "Give me 5 more days," he said quietly. "I won't let her linger in pain, but she deserves a chance that isn't in any textbook. I just need time to find it." There was hesitation, a long one. The sanctuary had limited funding, limited staff, and donors arriving soon. A dying calf was not what anyone wanted visitors to witness. But they all knew Aaron Blake's record. They had all seen him pull miracles from ruined beginnings. 5 days, the director agreed at last, but if there's no change, we make the call. Monica looked at Aaron as if he'd been handed a burning rope. 5 days to reverse a descent that had been building since the moment Luna lost her mother. 5 days to rekindle something inside a creature who had already decided darkness was easier than staying. That evening, after the facility lights dimmed, Monica lingered beside Luna's pen, her hand resting on the little elephant's flank. The desert wind hissed lightly through the vents, carrying the faint smell of sand and sage. Luna didn't stir, didn't move, didn't fight. She just continued her slow, quiet slide away from the world. "Aaron," Monica whispered when he returned for the late check, "I don't think she wants to live. I think she's already chosen her mother over us." Dr. Blake didn't answer right away. He stood there in the half-dark, staring at the tiny life that seemed to be folding itself inward, shrinking from touch, from sound, from hope. And for the first time in a long time, he felt unsure of his own ability to fix what was breaking. He locked up the medical wing that night with a heaviness in his chest, not knowing that somewhere else on the property, in a quiet row of recovery kennels, another grieving creature was lying perfectly still, waiting for something or someone to pull him back from the edge, too. The next morning, the desert sky was washed in pale pink when Dr. Aaron Blake pulled into the sanctuary. He sat in his truck for a long minute, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching the light slowly spill over the low hills. 5 days. That was what he had asked for, what he had insisted on. It didn't feel like much when a life was slipping through his fingers. Monica was already in the medical wing when he stepped inside, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a quick, careless knot. The bottle warmer hummed softly on the counter, a sound that used to comfort her and now just reminded her how many times she'd watched milk go to waste. "She's the same," Monica said quietly. "Didn't move all night." They walked together to Luna's pen. The little elephant lay in the same curled shape, her blind eyes half-lidded, her breathing shallow. Someone had added a fresh layer of straw, but it hadn't changed anything that mattered. "Morning, Luna," Aaron murmured, lowering himself to sit on the straw beside her. "We've got a busy schedule today, you and I." He had made a list the night before, a desperate collection of ideas that might have seemed foolish anywhere else. He had written them out anyway. Herd recordings, tactile contact with another elephant, different caretakers, new smells, new sounds, even a gentle sedative to see if easing her tension might open a door. They started with the recordings. In the small speaker by the pen, the deep rolling calls of elephant mothers filled the air, echoing faintly off the concrete. Monica watched Luna's ears, hoping for even the smallest flick. Nothing. The calf's body stayed tight and pulled inward, as if every sound pushed her further away instead of drawing her closer. Later that morning, they brought in Daisy, a calm older elephant who had helped steady more than one frightened calf over the years. Daisy stood on the other side of the reinforced gate, trunk reaching through the bars, blowing soft puffs of air toward the limp little form on the straw. Luna's skin rippled once under the touch, then went still again. "She feels it," Monica whispered. "She just doesn't care." By midday, the heat had settled like a weight over the sanctuary. Sweat darkened the back of Aaron's shirt as he leaned on the gate, watching Daisy gently explore Luna's side with her trunk. He had seen orphaned animals imprint on anything that resembled safety: a blanket, a caretaker's voice, even a stuffed toy. Luna had chosen nothing. "Donors confirmed for Friday," the director said from behind him. He hadn't heard her come in. "They want a tour, maybe a photo with one of the calves. I'd rather they didn't see this." "I know," Aaron answered, eyes still fixed on Luna. "I'll do what I can." That afternoon they tried something more clinical. Monica and a technician worked together to insert a feeding tube as gently as they could. Luna's reaction was the most life she had shown in days. A strained, panicked struggle, her legs kicking weakly at the air, breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts. They aborted the attempt before they were halfway through. Monica stepped back, chest heaving. "We're scaring her to death just to keep her alive," she said, voice breaking. "This doesn't feel like helping anymore." Aaron didn't argue. He simply reached for a towel, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked down at Luna, now trembling, her trunk curled protectively over herself. The numbers on his list blurred in his mind. So many methods, all built on the same assumption, that deep down the animal wanted to stay. Day 2 was worse than the first. Luna's temperature dipped slightly in the early hours, then climbed again. She rejected every bottle as if it offended her. Monica tried singing to her, an old lullaby from her grandmother, something she'd never done at work before. The sound hung in the pen, small and helpless against the weight of Luna's silence. "They're asking for updates," the director said that afternoon, hovering in the doorway. "We have to be honest if there's no progress, Aaron." He nodded without looking up from Luna's chart. "Tell them we're trying new interventions." "Are we?" the director asked softly. He didn't answer that. On the third day, the wind shifted, bringing in cooler air off the mountains. It should have been a relief. Instead, it only made the medical wing feel colder. Monica brought in different blankets, different scents, handfuls of fresh sage, a piece of the tarp that had covered Luna on the transport truck, even one of her own old T-shirts that still smelled faintly of laundry soap and coffee. "She doesn't know us," Monica said, laying the shirt near Luna's trunk. "Maybe she doesn't want to." Aaron knelt again by the calf's side, his knees complaining, as they always did now. "When I was your age," he told Luna quietly, "I lost a calf in Texas, hit by a truck. We did everything right and still lost him. Thought I'd walk away after that. Didn't. Stayed for the ones who came after. Maybe you don't care about any of that, but I'm not ready to let you go the same way." Luna's blind eyes remained half closed. Her ear twitched once. It could have been a reaction. It could have been nothing at all. On the fourth day, the donors arrived early, all pressed shirts and polite smiles, escorted on a quick tour of the parts of the sanctuary that looked like success. They saw healthy elephants lumbering through the main enclosure, rescued horses grazing along the fence line, volunteers laughing as they scrubbed down muddy water troughs. They did not see Luna's pen. They did not see Aaron sitting in the straw, talking softly to a calf who refused to acknowledge he was there. "Maybe," Monica said that evening, her voice hoarse, "maybe she's not meant to stay. Maybe some souls only get a little time." Aaron studied Luna's ribs, which seemed sharper than they had yesterday. 5 days. He had promised he wouldn't stretch her suffering past that. Promises had weight too. The 5th day dawned without color, the sky a flat, dusty gray. Luna was breathing, but each rise and fall of her chest was so faint that Monica had to lean close to see it. The bottle stayed untouched. The straw crinkled only when someone else moved. By late afternoon, the director stood in the doorway again, a file in her hand that Aaron didn't need to read to recognize. "We can schedule it for tomorrow," she said quietly. "Early, before the rest of the team comes in." Monica turned away, one hand covering her mouth. Aaron looked down at the little elephant who had never taken a single step inside this sanctuary, who had never once chosen to reach for them. He thought about stubborn hope and about cruelty disguised as mercy, and how hard it was to know which side of that line he stood on. "I'll sign it tonight," he said at last, "but I want to check on the rest of the patients first." The sun was sinking as he left the medical wing, casting long shadows across the grounds. The air smelled of dust and disinfectant and something tired. He walked more slowly than usual, his mind still inside that small pen with the quiet calf. On his way back from the horse paddocks, he cut behind the older building that housed the rehabilitation kennels. He didn't plan to go in. He just found himself there, drawn by habit and the faint, muffled sound of an animal shifting in straw. Through the open side door, he saw a row of kennels lined up in dim light. Most of the dogs inside were asleep or dozing. In the last run, pushed slightly apart from the others, a large shepherd lay perfectly still, eyes open, staring at nothing. There was no wag of the tail, no lift of the head when Aaron stepped into view. Just the slow, hollow kind of breathing he had come to recognize all too well. For a moment, man and dog simply regarded each other across the quiet space. Aaron felt the same heavy pull in his chest that he felt beside Luna's pen. Another body alive, another spirit somewhere else. He didn't know the dog's name yet. He only knew, with a clarity that surprised him, that Luna was not the only one on this property who had decided the world had nothing left to offer. The kennel building always held a faint echo at night, the kind that made footsteps sound lonelier than they really were. When Dr. Aaron Blake stepped inside, the air smelled of straw and iodine, warm fur, and something quieter, something like resignation. Most of the dogs were sleeping, sprawled out on their bedding or curled into tight circles. All except the shepherd in the far kennel, the one Aaron had noticed from the doorway the day before. The nameplate read, Dakota. Below it, a tag still hung from the latch. K-9 Unit, California Fire Response Division. It was worn thin, like it had been handled too many times. Dakota lay stretched on his side, facing the wall, his breath slow and heavy. The kind of breathing animals did when they weren't resting, just existing. Aaron crouched beside the bars, careful not to startle him, but there was no risk of that. Dakota didn't lift his head, didn't flick an ear. If not for the rise and fall of his ribs, he could have been carved from stone. A soft tap echoed from behind him. Aaron turned to see a boy, tall and thin, maybe 16, with a white cane in one hand and a plastic feed scoop in the other. His steps were steady, practiced, as if he knew every inch of this place without needing to see it. "You're Dr. Blake," the boy said, stopping a few feet away. "I can always tell by the way you walk. Heavy boots, slow steps." "Guilty," Aaron answered with a tired smile. "And you're—" "Eli. I help here after school. Mostly the scared ones or the old ones." He tilted his head slightly, listening. "Dakota's not sleeping. He hasn't really slept since he came." Aaron looked back at the dog. "What happened to him?" Eli let out a breath, long and small. "He lost his handler in the Ridgepoint fire. They worked together for 8 years. Folks said Dakota wouldn't leave the body. When they found them, he had burns on his legs and a fracture in his shoulder, but he kept pushing himself against his handler like he was trying to wake him up." The boy moved closer until his fingers brushed the bars of the kennel. Dakota didn't lift his head, but his tail moved once, barely, just enough to show he recognized the touch. "They were partners," Eli continued quietly. "And then, just like that, he was alone. They said he wouldn't eat unless someone sat in the kennel with him, so I started sitting, sometimes for hours." "You've helped him," Aaron said. Eli shook his head. "Not really. He lets me touch him, that's all. The rest of the time he just lies there and listens, like he's waiting for footsteps that aren't coming back. The boy crouched until he was level with the bars. He reached through and rested his hand on Dakota's shoulder. The shepherd didn't move, but something in the air shifted, as if the dog allowed himself, just for a moment, to remember what comfort felt like. "He used to bark," Eli said softly. "They trained him to warn firefighters when a structure wasn't safe. After the fire, he hasn't made a sound, not even a whine." Aaron watched the dog's chest rise and fall in slow rhythm. Two living creatures on the property, now breathing like they wished they weren't. "He needs something," Aaron murmured. Eli nodded. "Not someone telling him he's okay. He knows he's not. He needs something that feels like what he lost." Aaron thought of Luna, blind, broken-hearted, curled into herself like she wished the world would forget she ever existed. Then he looked at Dakota, lying motionless in a way that felt far too familiar. Loss, silence, surrender. Different species, same emptiness. Eli stood slowly, tapping his cane along the concrete. "He crawled out of his kennel once," the boy said, pausing at the doorway. "We didn't know until we heard the sheep bleating. There's a blind ewe in the next stall." Dakota pushed himself up against her side and fell asleep there. First real sleep he'd had in days. Aaron's brows lifted. "With the sheep?" "Yeah, blind animals don't judge you," Eli said simply. "They just listen. They breathe with you. Sometimes that's all it takes." The boy slipped out the door, leaving Aaron alone with the dog. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere outside, wind brushed against the tin roof. Dakota didn't move except for the faint twitch of a paw in his sleep, or whatever half-state he lived in now. Aaron lowered himself onto the floor beside the kennel bars. His joints protested, but he didn't mind. He sat quietly, letting the silence settle between them. "You're not the only one here who's hurting," he whispered, though he wasn't sure whether he was speaking to Dakota or himself. "There's a calf in the medical wing who's losing her fight. She's blind too, and right now she thinks she doesn't belong to anyone." Dakota exhaled sharply through his nose, a sound that wasn't quite a sigh, but close. Something stirred inside Aaron, something stubborn, something that refused to let two living souls simply fade away without trying one last, improbable thing. He didn't have the shape of the idea yet, but it flickered at the edges of his mind like a match waiting to catch. He rose slowly to his feet. Dakota didn't lift his head to watch him leave, but his ear twitched once, a small acknowledgement that he'd heard every word. Outside, the wind cut across the yard, carrying with it the dry scent of sagebrush and dust. The sky had gone deep blue, the kind of blue that held the chill of night just beneath it. Aaron walked back toward the medical wing, his boots crunching over gravel, the weight of two broken hearts pressing on him heavier than ever. Luna was still curled in her corner when he checked on her, still breathing those thin, fragile breaths. The straw rustled softly as he knelt beside her. "What if you didn't need us?" he whispered, brushing a hand gently across her back. "What if you needed someone who understands what it's like to lose your whole world?" Luna didn't stir, but the faint warmth of her body under his palm sent a quiet, electric certainty through him. Dakota had lost his anchor. Luna had lost her first and only guide. Two creatures drifting in the same dark. It wasn't a plan yet, but it was the beginning of one. By sunrise the next morning, the sanctuary felt unsettled in a way Aaron couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the restless wind that pushed against the outbuildings, rattling old metal panels. Maybe it was Luna's weakening breaths, or Dakota's hollow silence echoing in his thoughts. Or maybe it was the idea that had taken root inside him overnight, an idea so far outside standard practice that even he felt foolish entertaining it. Still, he found himself standing in the conference room At 8 sharp, a pile of notes in his hands and a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Monica arrived first, hair damp from an early shower, face tired from another night spent checking on Luna. The director followed, carrying a folder of medical reports as if the weight of the paper itself could anchor them in reality. 2 more veterinary staff filtered in, quiet and wary, knowing this meeting wasn't routine. When everyone had settled, Aaron drew a breath. "I want to propose something unusual," he began, keeping his voice steady. "Something untested." The director raised a brow immediately. "How untested?" "Untested enough that you might think I've lost my mind," Aaron said. "But I'm asking you to hear me out." He told them about Dakota, about the shepherd who no longer barked, who barely moved, about the way the dog's breathing matched the rhythm of a broken heart. He described how Dakota had crawled to the blind ewe, how he had found rest only beside another creature living in darkness. Monica frowned. "I know where this is going, Aaron, and absolutely not." He pressed on before objections drowned him out. "Dakota understands loss. He understands darkness. He may be the only creature here who knows exactly what Luna feels." "That's not enough?" the director snapped gently but firmly. "She's a fragile elephant calf. He's a traumatized working dog. They are not compatible species." "Elephants are prey animals," one of the vets added. "Even a friendly dog could activate her fear response." "Especially a shepherd," another said. "Instinct alone." "He didn't go to the ewe out of instinct," Aaron interrupted. "He went because she was blind, because she was as lost as he was. He lay beside her and finally slept." "And you think he can—" "What? Fix Luna?" the director asked. "No," Aaron admitted, "but he might reach her in a way we can't, in a way that makes her choose to stay." A long silence followed, heavy, uncomfortable, the kind of silence where people consider all the ways something could go wrong. Monica finally spoke, her voice tight. "This could terrify her, Aaron. She's hanging on by a thread. One bad scare could be the final push." "We wouldn't let them interact freely," he said quickly. "A controlled environment, a sealed observation room, safety staff present at every second." The director paced to the window, arms folded. Outside, the desert stretched pale and wide, dust lifting in soft swirls. "What happens if the donors hear about this?" she asked. "A dog placed near a dying elephant? If anything goes wrong, we'll be crucified." "If we do nothing," Aaron replied quietly, "she dies anyway." That froze the room. Truth had a way of doing that. He continued more gently. "She's not refusing food because of sickness. She's refusing because she's alone, because she lost the one creature she trusted in the world. Dakota understands that kind of loss better than any of us. If he can give her even a moment of recognition, some sign that she's not the only one left behind, maybe that's enough to turn her." One of the younger vets shifted uneasily. "Even if we agreed, I don't know that Dakota is stable enough. What if he lashes out? What if fear overrides whatever compassion he has left?" Aaron shook his head. "I sat with him last night. There is no aggression in him, only grief. He doesn't want to hurt anything." "That's what scares me," Monica said softly. "He's unpredictable because he's empty." The room fell quiet again until the director rubbed her temples and exhaled. "Walk me through exactly what you want to do." Aaron opened his folder. He had diagrams, safety protocols, placement maps for the observation room. He had listed distances, non-contact zones, emergency exits, and staff positions. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours, but had built a plan with the urgency of a man fighting the tide. When he finished explaining, the director closed her eyes for a brief, weary moment. Then she looked at the others. "We'll take a vote." The vote wasn't unanimous. It wasn't even enthusiastic. But the hands rose, one after another, more out of despair than conviction. They had run out of standard answers. And though no one would say it out loud, Luna was fading faster each hour. "Fine," the director said quietly. "One session, fully monitored, the smallest window of risk possible. If Luna shows distress, we end it immediately." Aaron nodded. "Thank you." But Monica wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the floor, jaw clenched, voice barely above a whisper. "If this goes wrong, I'll never forgive you." He couldn't blame her. She had spent more hours at Luna's side than anyone. She had watched hope drain out of a small, blind body and felt powerless to stop it. But he also knew that grief could hollow a person out, and Monica's fear came from love, not doubt. Later that afternoon, Aaron walked back across the sanctuary grounds, feeling the weight of every life depending on him. The wind had picked up again, tossing dust in uneven spirals. He headed toward the kennels, his steps slow, heavy with the decision that had just been made. Eli was sitting on the floor outside Dakota's run, his cane resting beside him, humming a tune that vibrated softly through the space, a soothing, rhythmic line that felt almost like a heartbeat. "You're back," Eli said without looking up. Something changed. Aaron eased down beside him. "We're going to try introducing Dakota to Luna, in a controlled session." Eli didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached his hand between the bars and brushed the tips of his fingers along Dakota's fur. "He won't hurt her," the boy said quietly. "He doesn't have anything left to hurt with." "That's what scares the team," Aaron admitted. Eli tilted his head, listening to Dakota's steady breaths. "When you lose your whole world, you're not dangerous. You're just waiting. Sometimes waiting for something to pull you back, sometimes waiting for permission to leave." Aaron felt a chill he couldn't explain. "Do you think he'd go to her?" he asked. Eli thought for a moment, then nodded once. "If she breathes like he does, yes." Dakota lifted his head then, slowly, heavily, as if acknowledging the sound of his name for the first time in days. His eyes landed on Aaron, not bright, not hopeful, but aware. It was the smallest movement, but for a dog who had nearly disappeared into his own grief, it felt like a door cracking open. Aaron rose to his feet, knowing there was no turning back now. He had been given 5 days to save Luna. He had spent 3 watching her slip through his fingers. Now he was down to 2, and the only idea left, the one no one wanted, the one everyone feared, was also the only chance she had. Tomorrow he would put a broken elephant and a broken K-9 in the same room, and hope 2 shattered hearts could find something to hold on to. The observation room had never felt so small. Its white walls, usually bright under overhead lights, seemed to shrink inward as the team prepared for the session. Cameras were positioned in each corner, cables taped neatly to the floor. A double-layered glass window separated the viewing area from the central space where a thick mat covered the ground and every sharp edge had been stripped away. It looked less like a treatment room and more like a place designed for 2 wounded spirits to meet without hurting each other. Aaron stood beside Monica, watching the technicians run final checks. She hadn't spoken much since yesterday's vote, and her jaw was set so tightly that it looked painful. When the director entered, she carried a clipboard she didn't need, something to hold perhaps, in case her hands started shaking. "Let's be clear," the director said quietly. "The slightest panic response from Luna, and we end the session. Dakota makes any sudden move, we end it. We do not risk trauma on top of trauma." Aaron nodded. "Understood." 2 handlers appeared at the far door, Dakota moving between them. The dog's gait was slow, not from injury, but from exhaustion that seemed to seep from his very bones. His coat looked clean. They must have brushed him that morning, though it hadn't changed the underlying dullness. When he was guided into the observation room, he paused, not out of alertness, but because he didn't appear to know why he was there. "Let him choose his place," Aaron instructed. The handlers unclipped the leash. Dakota stood still for several seconds, his head low, ears relaxed. Then, without prompting, he walked to the center of the room and lowered himself onto the mat, not sitting at attention, not lying in the stiff posture of a trained dog awaiting orders. He sank down slowly, folding his legs as if gravity had become too heavy to fight. "It's like he's trying to make himself small," Monica whispered. "He doesn't want to threaten anything." Aaron's breath caught. "No, he doesn't." A moment later, the opposite door opened. 2 staff members carried Luna in a sling, her frail legs tucked beneath her, her blind eyes half closed. She looked even smaller under the harsh fluorescent lights, like a life that had already drifted too far from the shore. When they set her gently on the mat near the corner, she curled into herself almost immediately, trunk tucked tight, her breathing a thin, trembling thread. The handlers retreated quickly, locking the door behind them. For a long moment, nothing happened. Luna's breaths were audible through the speakers, short, uneven, desperate. Dakota stayed still, his chest rising and falling in slow, measured cycles. Not looking at Luna, not approaching, just breathing. A strange stillness filled the room, so fragile that no one watching dared speak. Then Monica leaned closer to the glass. "Listen." Dakota had begun exhaling in long, rhythmic patterns, deep breaths that rolled out of him like he was humming with his lungs instead of his throat. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a whine. It was something quieter, something steady, a sound no one in the room had heard from him before. "A self-soothing vocalization?" Aaron murmured. Something he probably used during rescues. But for whom? For himself? Or for the terrified humans he had once pulled from collapsed buildings and burning homes? Luna's ear flicked. Just barely. It was the first voluntary movement she had made in almost 30 hours. Dakota continued breathing in that slow, even cadence, matching Luna's tremulous rhythm with one calm enough to anchor her. He still didn't turn his head toward her. He stayed parallel to her body, facing the same direction, offering presence without pressure, something instinct knew long before science ever did. Minutes passed like that, quiet, still, a broken elephant and a grieving dog sharing the same air, the same trembling silence. Then something subtle shifted. Luna uncurled her trunk an inch, not toward the wall, not toward safety, toward him. "Look at that," someone whispered behind the glass. But no one looked away. Dakota responded by lowering his head slowly to the floor, laying it on his paws the way he might have done beside his. Fallen handler, a posture of surrender, of calm, a message across species. You're not alone. Luna shifted again, her trunk sliding forward across the mat until the tip hovered inches from Dakota's outstretched paw. Another soft breath left Dakota's chest, followed by a low rumble, not loud, not demanding. An invitation. And then it happened. Luna extended her trunk the final inch, touching the worn fur on his paw as gently as a falling leaf. Dakota didn't flinch. Instead, he adjusted the position of his paw ever so slightly, enough for Luna to feel the warmth beneath it, enough to say, "I'm here. I'm not leaving." A sound broke through the speakers, a tiny trembling chirp from Luna's throat. A sound newborn elephants give when they reach for their mothers. Monica's hand flew to her mouth. The director's eyes filled with tears. She didn't bother blinking away. But the miracle wasn't done. Luna's breathing began to change, settling into a steadier rhythm that followed Dakota's. Her body, once pulled tight as a fist, softened along her spine. For the first time since arriving at the sanctuary, she looked less like a creature fading from the world and more like one pausing before turning back toward it. Dakota closed his eyes. Not in sleep. He wasn't relaxed enough for that. It was something closer to acceptance. Or maybe it was relief, as if Luna's small touch eased a weight he'd been carrying alone. 10 minutes passed like that, then 20. At the 30-minute mark, Luna did something none of them had dared hope for. She leaned closer, her forehead brushing the mat near Dakota's shoulder. Not fully trusting, not fully returning, but trying. Aaron swallowed hard. She's choosing to connect. That's the first choice she's made since losing her mother. When the handlers entered to separate them, Dakota didn't rise abruptly. He shifted back inch by inch, never breaking the calm rhythm of his breathing until Luna settled in place again. And Luna, the calf who had refused every bottle for nearly a week, did not recoil when they approached. She remained in her softened posture, trunk relaxed, breathing steady. Back in the medical wing, an hour later, Monica offered her a bottle, out of obligation more than hope. But this time, Luna didn't turn away. She stretched her trunk toward the familiar scent, hesitated once, then latched on with a weak but unmistakable pull. Monica choked on a breath. "She's eating." Oh my God, she's actually eating. Aaron leaned against the wall, overwhelmed with a feeling he hadn't let himself believe in for days. "It wasn't the milk," he said quietly. "It was him." Outside the treatment room, the desert wind died down, replaced by a calm that settled over the sanctuary like a long-held breath finally released. Today, Luna had touched a paw. Tomorrow, she might reach for life. The morning after that first miraculous session felt different from any morning the sanctuary had seen in weeks. The desert air was cool and still, holding the faint scent of sage that drifted across the grounds like a small promise. When Aaron entered the medical wing, he found Monica already at Luna's pen, leaning over the gate in a mixture of disbelief and exhaustion. But this time, her tired eyes carried a fragile brightness. "She slept deeper last night," Monica whispered. No trembling, no sharp breaths, just steady. Luna lifted her head slightly at the sound of familiar voices. It wasn't a full turn, not a clear recognition, but it was movement, a conscious motion from a calf who had spent days withdrawing into herself. She stretched her trunk toward the bottle, hesitated briefly, then drank in slow, weak pulls. Each swallow felt like a small victory. "We need to schedule another session," Aaron said softly. 3 hours later, Dakota walked into the observation room again, guided gently by Eli. The boy held the shepherd's leash lightly, almost as though the dog was the one leading him. Dakota's steps were slow but purposeful this time. His ears twitched at unfamiliar sounds, his nostrils flaring as he took in the scent of straw and elephant. When Eli unclipped the leash, Dakota didn't linger by the door. He walked to the same spot he had chosen yesterday and lowered himself down with the kind of careful movement creatures make when they carry old hurts. Luna was brought in next. She didn't curl into the corner as quickly as before. Her trunk shifted as she searched for the breathing pattern she had learned in a single session. Deep, steady, patient. When she found it, her ears moved forward, a small but meaningful gesture in elephant language. The handlers stepped out, and silence wrapped around the room. Dakota began first. He inhaled slowly, then let out a soft, chest-deep rumble that vibrated gently across the mat. It wasn't a bark or growl, more like a hum, a low note held between breath and memory. Luna responded with a faint chirp, barely audible through the glass. It was the same sound she had made the day before, but longer now, more deliberate. "They're talking," Eli murmured in the viewing room, his head tilted, listening to rhythms none of the others had learned to hear yet. It wasn't just sound. It was movement. Dakota tapped one paw lightly against the mat, a single, deliberate gesture. Luna froze, trunk hovering just above the floor, then moved it in a slow arc until the tip brushed the spot where his paw had tapped. As soon as she reached it, Dakota exhaled once, softly, a confirmation. In that moment, a new system emerged, a call and response of quiet signals. Dakota would shift his weight slightly, and Luna would adjust her posture. He would tap the mat again, and she would follow the vibration. He breathed in a rhythm that guided her own breath away from panic and toward calm. This was not training. This was not instinct. It was a shared conversation between two creatures who had lost the same thing in different worlds. Aaron stood with his hands braced on the windowsill. "He's teaching her orientation," he said in a whisper. "Through sound, through pressure. He's giving her a map only she can read." The next part took everyone by surprise. With extraordinary care, Dakota rose onto his feet. His motions were slow and exaggerated. He walked 3 steps forward, then stopped, glancing back at her, not with his eyes, but with his ears, waiting for her reaction. Luna lifted her trunk and let out a trembling puff of air as if gathering courage. Then she leaned forward and pushed herself upright. Her legs shook under her small weight, but she stayed standing. "There you go," Monica murmured, pressing a hand to her chest. "Sweet girl, you can do this." Guided by the rhythm of Dakota's steps, Luna took one uncertain step of her own, the first she had taken since arriving at the sanctuary. Her trunk brushed along the mat, searching for a sound to follow. Dakota made a soft clicking noise in his throat, an improvised guidepost, and she homed in on it, taking another step. "She's not following him," Eli said softly. "She's following his sound. She trusts that sound." For 20 minutes, Luna followed Dakota around the small portion of the room. 3 steps forward, 2 steps to the side, 1 pause to breathe. It looked like a strange, slow-motion dance, but it was something far deeper. A blind calf relearning the world through the footsteps of a dog who had once led men through burning wreckage. When Luna tired, Dakota sensed it before the humans did. He lowered himself again, curling his body in the same direction as hers. Luna folded back down beside him, her trunk resting in the space between them, as though that small pocket of warmth was the only anchor she needed. The handlers ended the session there, unwilling to push Luna beyond her limits. Dakota stood when they entered, but not abruptly. He moved slowly, letting Luna feel his retreat so she wouldn't panic. She stayed lying down, relaxed, not shrinking into herself as she had so many times before. Back in the medical wing, Luna drank nearly half a bottle, more than she had taken in days. "She's choosing life," Monica said, tears forming again. "She's finally choosing it." But for Aaron, the moment that stayed with him wasn't the drinking. It was the way Luna had leaned her head toward Dakota when he rose to leave, as though trying to hold on to his presence just a little longer. "She's bonding," he murmured. "She's forming a dependency. That's good. But it means we can't slow down now." That evening, Aaron returned to the kennels to check on Dakota. He found the dog sitting up in his run, watching the hallway instead of staring at the wall. His ears were perked, not fully, but enough to show alertness where there had been none. "You made progress today," Aaron said softly. "You both did." Dakota didn't move, but his eyes, once clouded with grief, held a faint spark of recognition, a fragile light reawakening after weeks of darkness. As Aaron walked away, he heard a soft sound behind him. Dakota shifted his paws, then released a quiet, low rumble, the same sound he had shared with Luna. It echoed down the empty hallway, gentle, patient, alive. And for the first time, Aaron believed this strange, fragile bond might be the thing that saved them both. By the time the desert afternoon slipped into evening, 3 full weeks had passed since Luna first touched Dakota's paw. In that short stretch of days, the sanctuary had transformed in ways no one had expected. What began as a desperate gamble had become a quiet miracle unfolding slowly before their eyes. Luna now rose each morning with a steadier breath, searching for familiar sounds with her trunk lifted like a question. Dakota, once hollow and nearly voiceless, had started greeting Eli with a soft tap of his tail. Their sessions had become the heartbeat of the sanctuary, gentle, deliberate, a whisper of hope in a place that had learned not to expect it. But on the 7th day of that week, a strange tension settled over the Nevada sky. The wind smelled different, sharper, drier, electric. Thunderheads gathered over the distant hills, the kind that rarely visited the desert but never arrived softly when they did. Monica noticed Luna shifting uneasily before any weather app issued a warning. The little elephant's ears reacted to sounds humans couldn't hear yet, distant vibrations, subtle rumbles in the sky. "She's anxious," Monica murmured. "Animals feel storms long before we do." Aaron nodded. "Let's keep her session short today. No surprises." Dakota entered the observation room as he always did. Slow steps, low posture, that gentle readiness he had learned somehow in the wreckage of his grief. Luna responded immediately, stretching her trunk toward the soft rhythm of his breathing. They moved through their familiar ritual, the tapping, the rumbling, the shared pauses. But there was an edge to Luna's movements, a tremor that hadn't been there before. Halfway through the session, a loud crack split the sky. The building shuddered faintly. The sound wasn't human loud inside the insulated room, but it was enough. Luna froze, her breath hitched sharply, her body tightening into the shape she once retreated into daily. Dakota stepped toward her instinctively, letting out a calm, low sound, trying to ground her. "She's slipping," Monica whispered, palm pressed against the window. Before Dakota could finish soothing her, another thunderclap rolled in, closer this time. Luna jerked, stumbling sideways. Her back legs trembled. Panic rose through her small body in waves. She swung her trunk wildly, searching for the safe sound she'd relied on for weeks. Dakota barked, not loud, not aggressive, but sharp enough to cut through her spiraling fear. It was his first bark since the fire. Everyone stiffened, unsure if Luna would interpret it as a threat. But the bark anchored her. She turned toward the sound, ears pitched forward, searching. Dakota stepped closer, more urgently this time, shifting from careful guide to protective instinct. His tail lowered, his ears back, not in fear, but in the focused posture of a dog confronting danger. A sudden gust slammed against the building. Something metal rattled violently outside. Then came the scream of tearing tin. Before anyone could react, a sheet of roofing from the equipment shed broke loose and hurtled across the yard, crashing against the wall just beyond Luna's stall. The impact shook the floor. The handlers sprinted toward the doors, but they were seconds too late. Luna bolted. She wasn't coordinated. Panic robbed her of direction. She ran toward the nearest wall, stumbling, trunk flailing. Her blind eyes didn't see the hazard, the jagged edge of a metal panel blown in by the wind and now half hanging inside the observation wing. "Luna!" Monica cried, slamming her fist against the glass. Dakota launched himself forward, not toward safety, toward her. He hurled his body between Luna and the falling metal, shoving her sideways with the full weight of his chest. The sheet came down with a sharp, slicing crack. The sound echoed through the room. Dakota yelped, a raw, agonizing sound. His back leg buckled. The handlers burst in, grabbing at Luna, dragging the loose metal away. Dakota collapsed to the floor, his breath coming in short, shocked bursts. Blood soaked into the mat near his hind leg. A deep cut, not immediately life-threatening, but bad enough that any movement sent a tremor of pain through him. Luna crouched beside him, trembling, unable to understand why the familiar rhythm of his breath had turned uneven and strained. When they separated the animals, Luna made a weak, broken chirp, one they had never heard from her before. It was the sound elephant calves make when they lose sight of their mothers. Dakota whined once as they lifted him onto a stretcher. His dark eyes searched the room until they found Luna. She reached her trunk toward him, but the handlers guided her away before she could touch him. The session ended in chaos, and the storm outside finally broke. Sheets of rain hammered the metal roofs, wind howling against the fences. But inside the medical wing, a deeper quiet fell, one filled with grief and fear and unanswered questions. Dakota was taken into surgery for stitches and cleaning. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was enough to require rest, antibiotics, and strict isolation while he healed. The injury itself mattered less than what came with it. He wouldn't be allowed near Luna's enclosure for days. The consequences were immediate. That night, Luna refused food again. She curled into the tight ball they thought she had left behind, her breathing thin and quick, searching for a rhythm that wasn't there. Monica tried the recordings, the sage scent, even her grandmother's lullaby. Nothing worked. By the next morning, Luna was shaking. She pressed herself against the corner of the pen, trunk stretched in the direction of the kennel building, making soft, fractured chirps that echoed down the hallway. The sanctuary had never heard anything so small, sound so desperately lost. "She thinks he abandoned her," Monica whispered, wiping at her eyes. "No," Aaron said quietly, watching the calf's trembling body. "She thinks the world took him the same way it took her mother." They debated breaking protocol to bring Dakota closer, but infection risk made it impossible. Luna declined through the afternoon, slowly at first, then rapidly. Her breathing grew ragged, her body still stiff with fear. Every time the wind rattled outside, she flinched violently, searching for a sound that wouldn't come. By nightfall, Aaron stood at her pen with a decision he didn't want to make. "If she doesn't see him," he whispered, "we lose her again." Beside him, Eli, who had come after hearing the commotion, reached through the bars and touched the straw near Luna's trunk. "She's not giving up," he said softly. "She's calling to him. She thinks he can hear her." "And can he?" Aaron asked bitterly. Eli tilted his head. "He's in pain, but he knows her voice." As if proving his words, a faint, distant rumble drifted through the hallway, the kind of low, chest-deep sound only one dog in the sanctuary made anymore. Dakota, 3 buildings away, had heard her. Luna froze. Then she slowly uncurled. Then, for the first time completely on her own, she stood, shaking, unsteady, but standing. She let out a soft, determined chirp toward the direction of that faint rumble. Aaron felt a chill sweep through him, something deeper than fear. "Monica," he said, voice trembling, "get Eli. Get the portable barriers. I don't care how we do it. We're taking her to him." Because tonight wasn't about medical charts or protocols. It was about a little blind elephant who refused to lose the only soul who ever sat beside her. And it was about a wounded K-9 who, despite his pain, had answered her call. The storm had passed by dawn, leaving the sanctuary washed in the kind of stillness that follows a night of fear. The desert air was cool, holding the faint smell of wet metal and sagebrush. Luna stood in the center of her pen, trembling but upright, her blind eyes fixed toward the distant kennels as though sheer will alone might pull Dakota back to her side. Aaron, Monica, and Eli worked through the early hours preparing a path, temporary barriers, soft mats, staff positioned every few yards. They weren't transporting Luna for treatment or weighing. They were following something older than protocol, older than logic, the certainty that 2 wounded souls needed each other to survive. When they finally opened the pen gate, Luna hesitated only a second before stepping forward. Her legs shook under her small weight, but she moved with intent, guided by instinct and the faint vibrations she remembered from Dakota's presence. Eli walked a few steps ahead of her, tapping lightly with his cane. The soft clicks formed a breadcrumb trail of sound that Luna followed, her trunk stretched toward the echoes. Dakota lay in the recovery kennel, stitched and bandaged, his injured leg propped carefully on a padded roll. He hadn't slept. Even in pain, he'd lifted his head at every distant chirp from the elephant wing, every rustle that might have been her. When he heard the shuffle of many feet approaching, he let out a low rumble, weak but unmistakable. Luna froze, ears spreading wide. She chirped back, a trembling sound that carried through the hallway like a question asked and answered all at once. The staff opened the kennel door. Dakota tried to push himself upright, but his injured leg buckled. Eli knelt quickly beside him, steadying his shoulder. "Easy, boy," he whispered. "She's coming to you." They set up portable panels to keep things safe, creating a small open area where Luna could approach without risk. When Luna stepped inside, the room seemed to shrink around them, holding its breath. The calf moved with slow, purposeful steps, searching the air for the sound she needed. Dakota lowered his head, letting out another soft rumble that vibrated through the floor more than the air. Luna reached him. She lowered her trunk and touched the bandage on his leg, tracing its edge with a gentleness no one thought a frightened calf could possess. Dakota flinched at the contact, not from fear but from the jolt of recognition. Then he rested his head against her front leg, closing his eyes as if exhaustion and relief had collided inside him all at once. For a long moment, no one moved. The sanctuary, the storm, the weeks of fear and fading hope. Everything seemed to fall away in the quiet spell between them. "That's it," Monica whispered, a hand pressed to her heart. "They're whole again." In the days that followed, Dakota remained under limited activity orders, but they allowed Luna to visit him during supervised sessions. She learned to navigate the hallway by sound alone. Eli's tapping cane, the gentle hum of the overhead lights, and, most of all, Dakota's breathing. As his stitches healed, their sessions moved outdoors into the extended sand pen built just for them. Reporters began calling, then researchers, then conservation groups. But the sanctuary protected Luna and Dakota fiercely, allowing only a small handful of specialists to observe. What they witnessed changed more than one career path. Dakota developed a new set of guiding signals, slower, more patient than before. He couldn't walk quickly, not with his healing leg, but Luna adjusted her pace instinctively to match his. She followed the soft scrape of his paws across the sand, the gentle puff of breath he used to warn her of obstacles, the low hum he made when he wanted her to stop. And Luna, once the most fragile creature on the property, began to grow stronger. Her appetite returned. Her legs steadied. She discovered the world through sound, through wind moving across the fence rails, through pebbles shifting underfoot, through the soft panting of the dog who had chosen to sit beside her when she had nothing left. Eli became their constant companion. He walked ahead of them, tapping out new paths, laughing softly whenever Luna's trunk brushed his arm as if to say she recognized a fellow traveler in darkness. The sanctuary staff began referring to Eli, Dakota, and Luna as the three shadows. One boy, one dog, one elephant connected by loss and rebuilt by trust. When summer ripened into fall, the board approved a new enclosure, the Luna-Dakota Habitat, designed specifically for interspecies therapy and long-term rehabilitation. It featured sound markers, textured pathways, shaded rest areas, and a padded ridge where Dakota could lie comfortably while Luna nudged him along with her trunk. Months passed. The story of the blind elephant and the grieving K-9 reached beyond Nevada, beyond the United States, into classrooms and wildlife programs around the world. Donations surged, not because of tragedy, but because people needed to believe that healing could come from the most unlikely places. And then, one evening, everything came full circle. It was just before sunset, the desert sky glowing orange and lavender. Dakota, now mostly recovered but slower with age, made his way along the walking ridge. His steps wobbled occasionally, age creeping in where injury had once lived. Luna walked beside him, keeping pace, trunk hovering near his shoulder. At one point, Dakota misjudged a step, and his weakened leg slipped. Before he could fall, Luna shifted her weight, pressing her trunk gently against his side, steadying him with a tenderness that mirrored his own from months before. "He taught her how to live," Monica whispered from the viewing deck. "And she's teaching him how to keep going." When they reached the overlook, Dakota eased himself onto the padded ridge, sighing softly. Luna lowered her head beside him, their silhouettes touching in the golden light. The desert wind carried the quiet sound of Luna's gentle rumble, a sound elephants use to comfort their young. Dakota answered with the faintest hum left in his aging chest. It was impossible to tell who was guiding whom anymore. Aaron watched them with a hand braced at his jaw, overwhelmed by the memory of the tiny, fading calf who had once curled into a corner waiting to die, and the broken dog who silently waited beside a wall for a world that no longer made sense. "They saved each other," he said softly. "All we did was step aside long enough to let it happen." And as the sun dipped below the Nevada horizon, the little blind elephant and the old K-9 settled into the cool sand side by side. Two survivors bound not by species, but by the simple miracle of choosing life again. Their story had begun in darkness. It ended in a shared light neither of them had ever expected to find. If this story touched your heart even a little, let me know with a simple comment. Just a zhou or one is enough. It helps this little community grow, and it tells me you'd like more stories like this. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss the next journey we share together.